Hi, we are Tim, Nynne and Alberte, and we would like to present Modern India.
Corruption in politics. Corruption is generally defined as abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. Corruption can be classified into three categories: grand, petty, and political. Grand corruption is carried out at a high level of government in order to distort policies or the central functioning of the state, which makes the leaders gain benefits at the cost of the public. Petty corruption is made by entrusted low and mid-level officials in interactions with ordinary citizens, for instance at schools or hospitals, in order to gain personal basic benefits. Political corruption is political decision makers who, for instance, manipulate policies or financing in order to sustain their power, wealth, and public image. The main cause of corruption in India is due to the connection between bureaucrats, criminals, and politicians. This has caused a society where corruption thrives. According to the global coalition Transparency International, India is the 102nd most corrupt country out of the 180 countries they have examined. That means that they are way more corrupt than most Western countries, but quite uncorrupt compared to many third world countries. This is also visible on the map here, where the yellow countries are the least corrupt and the red are the most corrupt. In 2014, India elected a new Prime Minister named Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi promised that he would put an end to corruption in India, but 5 years later it remains a promise and nothing more than that. During his time as Prime Minister, many scandals have been uncovered, including a large banking scandal involving $2 billion.
Living standards in India. 2/3 of India's population live in poverty. 68.8% live on less than $2 a day. When looking at BNP, India's is 2.5 trillion US dollars, which is almost the same as the UK. However, if one looks at BNP per capita, India has $1.9 thousand per year in comparison to the UK, with 40,000 US dollars per year per capita. Their low BNP per capita is due to the overpopulation, forcing many Indians to live in slums, where poverty rules and access to water is inadequate. 24% of urban living Indians live in these slums. A big problem in India is the lack of employment for the people who do not live in a big city. This means that a lot of citizens have to work different odd jobs to get by. In the slums of India, the poverty is so extreme that there is no sufficient water supply, no garbage disposal, and often no electricity. The poverty affects the people living in India in numerous ways. An example of this is the fact that there is a high infant mortality. 1.4 million children die in India before their 5th birthday every year. Another consequence of the poverty is the huge amount of child marriages. Young women in India get married at an early age in order to get financial security for themselves. Despite a ban of child marriages in 2006 in India, a survey shows that 44% of Indian women still get married before they are at a legal age. The poverty also means that in India there is a lack of education about safe sex and a lack of condoms. This has caused 2.7 million Indians to be affected by the HIV virus in one way or another. This is of course very unfortunate, considering that the HIV virus is a very taboo subject in India.
Education. As India is developing at a rapid level, properly educating the youth is essential. This is especially because of the young adults and children that makes up a massive amount of the population. In fact, India has the largest youth population in the world. 600 million people are below 25 years old, and 28% of the population are less than 14 years of age. With so many young people, India can undergo a massive growth in economy and wealth, but only if they manage to properly educate the many youngsters. On the other hand, the amount of young people can also have fatal consequences for India. If the youth's lack of opportunities continues, they might become frustrated enough to consider extremities. For instance, radical religious group thrives in environments like these.
India has over 700,000 schools and counting. However, the teachers are generally poorly educated and the student-to-teacher ratio is very high. Therefore, a large part of parents choose to put their kids into private school. Only 70% of all children in India attend public schools. That being said, only 50% of Indian children even go to school. This is partially due to the social inequality in India and the overall lack of social mobility, which makes it hard for people to alter their living circumstances.
The Indian education system is quite old-fashioned. In an article released by India Today in 2019, they list 7 things that needs to be immediately changed in order for the education system to improve massively. 2 of the most central changes that they recommend is that there needs to be less rote learning and that they should embrace technology and computers more in the schools. This is emblematic of the problems in the Indian school system, namely that they have not adapted to the modern era and that they still utilize old principles that is not used in many other countries. Bollywood. Bollywood is, as the name implies, home to the movie industry in the eastern part of the world. It is a wordplay on the American Hollywood, which is the western home of the movie industry, and Bombay, which is the former name of the giant Indian city, Mumbai. Although the name Bollywood was not created until the 1970s, India's movie industry dates back all the way to 1913. However, growth was slow until 1947, when the industry was reformed and the modern India film was born. Since then, the industry has grown rapidly and is now massive. Bollywood produced almost 1,800 movies in 2018. Most are in Hindi, but some also has partial Urdu or Punjabi and sometimes other languages as well. Bollywood movies often follow the same outline that is called masala, which means spices. The movies are up to 3 and 4 hours long and include an intermission. They will also often include lots of songs and dances. The movies are very clean in nature due to the Indian culture, which means that you can always count on a romance between a boy and a girl, but not as much as a single kiss or anything else of a sexual nature. They will also often include fight scenes, but they will never feature blood or any sort of very violent scenes. That is the stereotypical Bollywood movie anyway. This belongs to the genre the courtesan film, and while there are other genres, this seems to be the more popular one. Other genres include the historical epic or drama, which typically is a drama taking place in a different era, the mythological movie, which involves some sort of Hindi myth or god, and the curry western, which is an Indian-produced western comparable to the Italian spaghetti western, which were produced in the 1950s to 60s. In our modern society, and with Bollywood becoming a more internationally known phenomenon, the outdated storylines of some of Bollywood's movies are being exposed to a great amount of criticism. The storylines are often very connected to proper Indian culture, which to the more Western civilization may present as misogynistic and degrading of women. It is simply outdated. And these are our sources.